Want to save a truckload? Get a Peterbilt 579 from Brandt with payments as low as $3,500 a month. Get the same low rates for your choice of contract length, 3, 4, or 5 years, and you can buy or walk when the contract ends. It's the only payment plan that puts you in the driver's seat. You could say it's a big rig deal. Drive to your Brandt Peterbilt dealer to save a truckload while quantities last.
Blog Talk Radio.
Oh no, can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you loud and clear, bud.
There says here that they're experiencing a site-wide issue.
Oh.
Okay, here we go.
Jason?
Yes, hello, Mr. Stanton. How are you today, sir?
Good, good.
It's a pleasure and an honor to have you with us today on Paranormal Guys Inc. Radio. How's things treating you, sir?
Well, we had over 13 feet of snow this winter, so I got a lot of snow outside.
And you're over there in New Brunswick, and that's quite a lot of snow for that area.
Last year we only had 12 feet.
Yeah.
Ours is just starting to melt, actually. It's raining
it wasn't
today.
too bad for us here. It's actually quite warm. It's a little rainy, but can't complain. Want to welcome you to our little show here. And again, I'd like to say it is quite an honor to speak to you. And I just wanted to give a little bit of a background for people that may not know who you are. I'm sure they must, but just in case, if you'd like, I could read your bio. It says here, Stanton T. Friedman received his BSc and MSc degrees in physics from the University of Chicago in 1955 and 1956. He was employed for 14 years as a nuclear physicist for such companies as GE, GM, Westinghouse, TRW Systems, General Nucleonics, and McDonnell Douglas on such advanced classified, eventually canceled projects as nuclear aircraft, and fusion rockets and nuclear power plants for space. Since 1967, he has lectured on the topic, Flying Saucers Are Real, at more than 600 colleges and over 100 professional groups in 50 states, 9 provinces, and 16 other countries. He has published more than 80 UFO papers and appeared on hundreds of radio and TV programs. He is the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident and co-authored Crash at Corona, the definitive study of the Roswell incident. Top Secret Magic, his explosive book, was the Majestic 12 group established in 1947 to deal with crash saucers. Published in 1996 and went through 6 printings. The second edition, with a new printing, then was presented with a Lifetime Achievement Award in Leeds, England, in September 2002 by UFO Magazine of the UK. A documentary, Stanton T. Friedman Is Real, was broadcast in Canada in 2002. And excuse me a little bit, I'm just quite nervous because you are such a huge person and personality out there. So if I seem like I'm stuttering a bit, it's just I just want this to go very well. So again, thank you for joining us. And I'd like to start off by asking you, what exactly got you interested in UFOs in the first place?
Well, it was purely by accident, you might say. I was a young nuclear physicist working for General Electric on far-out nuclear aircraft, big program. And I was ordering books from an outfit in New York, a discount place. I needed one more book so I wouldn't have to pay shipping. I'm a cheapskate. And there was the report on unidentified flying objects by Air Force Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, who had been head of Project Blue Book in the early 50s. This was in 1958. And the book was a hardcover book marked down from $2.95 to $1. Don't see many of them anymore.
Great.
And I figured, A, the Air Force was a co-sponsor of our program with the Atomic Energy Commission. B, so, how could I not think well of the Air Force? B, I thought that, gee, if these things are real and using nuclear power would certainly help our program. And C, it was only costing me $1, and shipping would have been that much anyway. If it was just ridiculous, it'd be worth the laugh. It was cheap. Incidentally, I should stress that contrary to what some people think, the aircraft nuclear propulsion program was a large program. In '58, we spent $100 million. The program employed 3,500 people full-time, of whom 1,100 were engineers and scientists. And I stress this because there are a lot of people who don't seem to understand how big the classified programs are. It wasn't a block budget program, but the data was classified. Right. This wasn't 12 professors and 30 grad students. This is a massive effort. And for the younger people, $100 million was a lot of money in 1958.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I read that book. I read 15 more books, moved off to California. The program was canceled after I left, not because I left. And I made a great discovery in about 1960 at the University of California, Berkeley Library. I found a copy, a privately published version of Project Blue Book Special Report number 14. Largest study ever done. It was not classified, but it was also not publicly distributed. It was completed in 1955. The Air Force press release was given very wide distribution, and it included a quote from the Secretary of the Air Force, Donald Quarles. I mean, how could you get a higher authority than that? Saying, on the basis of this report, we believe that no objects such as those publicly described as flying saucers have overflown the United States. Even the unknown 3% could have been identified as conventional phenomena or illusions if more complete observational data had been available. And people have said silly things like that many times since. However, I had the report in front of me, data on 3,201 sightings, 240 charts, tables, graphs, and maps. And holy cow, the Secretary of the Air Force was lying through his teeth. I worked on classified programs. I was accustomed to sort of tiptoeing around the truth sometimes when you didn't want to release anything, you didn't want to lie. But the unknowns weren't 3%. They were 21.5%.
Goodness.
That's not a round-off error, in other words.
No.
And they were completely separate from the 9.3% that were listed as insufficient information. So on both counts, he was lying, flat out not telling the truth. That intrigued the heck out of me. And so I got determined to find out what the heck is going on here. And it took me a while. I read more books, joined APRO and NICAP, the old two major UFO groups long since gone. And I didn't give my first lecture, actually, again, by accident almost, until 1967. I had gotten to know Frank Edwards, who was a prominent news person, journalist, when I lived in Indianapolis. I was a 3 years here, 3 years there, 3 years somewhere else kind of guy. They kept canceling programs on me. Anyway, I got to know Frank, and he wrote a new book, Flying Saucers, Serious Business, sent me a copy when I moved on to Pittsburgh to work for Westinghouse on the nuclear rocket program. We at least did test that. Successfully, I might add. But they canceled the program anyway, but still. I called Frank, and I said, Frank, you know everybody. Give me some clues. How can I go public on this subject? And he gave me some names, and one of them was the producer for a talk show in Pittsburgh on KDKA, one of the old, big 50,000-watt clear channel radio stations, one of the first in the country. Right. And I called, the name of the show was appropriate. It was called Contact. Cool. And I called them and gave them my background. I mean, normally a Westinghouse nuclear physicist, those are gold-plated credentials. Get you a loan on a house, and all that sort of thing. But it was one of those, don't call us, we'll call you. Well, less than a month later, they called me at 6:30 to be on a 7 o'clock show because somebody had canceled. Lord knows, I wish I did, how many other people they had called first, but I live near the station. Could you go on our show tonight, please? So I did. Somebody at work heard me and asked me to talk to her book review club, which was reading Frank's book. So my first lecture was in her living room. And I did the show more and got better at handling hosts who didn't know what they were talking about. You do run across them once in a while, and but who act like they do, and I'm there to cut them down, you know. And I gave a bunch more talks and managed finally to give a talk at a college, which is what I had wanted. And I made an exciting discovery. I talked to the man from Carnegie Mellon University, used to be Carnegie Tech, and he had heard me on the radio, and yeah, we'd love to have you speak, Stan. How much do you want, he said. Now, stupid me, I thought it's a daytime talk, 11 o'clock, I'm going to have to take half a day off work. I asked for $100, figuring he'd cut me down to 50, you know. This is back 67. And I knew his wife. She worked with me at Westinghouse. And he sold. I mean, he bought it. And then he told me, because I did know his wife, that what he was paying the other people in the series, $1,500, $1,700.
Wow. Holy, what a difference.
And, yeah, but what he did something special. I gave the talk, it was over a month later, I guess, and it was very well received, loads of people. I guess they had nothing else to do at 11 in the morning. And he wrote a nice letter to the agent who had booked the other speakers for him. And he booked me at the Engineering Society of Detroit for $300 in expenses. Wow. What was intriguing to me was that they were sold out 3 weeks in advance for 1,008 people for dinner and a talk, and there were no negative questions.
Wow.
And that impressed me, because Engineering Society of Detroit isn't a bunch of little old ladies in tennis shoes now, you understand, or kooky, quacky people. Hard-nosed professionals. And so I gave a lot more professional talks, sections of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, Institute of Electrical Electronic Engineers, American Nuclear Society, and I had to respect these people. I mean, I was still pretty young. When you get your boss's boss's boss attending and saying nice things, you know, you can't ignore that.
That's right.
So when the bottom fell out of the Advanced Nuclear and Space System Development programs, and it did in about 1969, 1970, I went full-time lecturing on flying saucers. I've done consulting work since, worked on a nuclear reactor here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Point-in-the-Pro nuclear generating station, commissioning that, and several other studies, but primarily ufologizing, if I can make up a word. And, you know, I've had a great response. I've only had 11 hecklers and over 700 lectures, and 2 of them were drunk. And I'm told, at least everybody tells me, if you talk about sports, religion, or politics, you'll get much more than that, Stan. So what I'm saying is I think I have my finger on the pulse of the world, if you will. And I haven't spoken everywhere, but I have spoken in Australia and China and Korea and Turkey and Israel and Finland and, you know, I've been around Brazil, Argentina. I've been out there, and I've done hundreds of radio and television shows. So I've had a good chance to get a feedback loop, you know, in the question and answer period after my lectures and stuff like that. So I think I bring to bear 4 special characteristics, if you will, on this subject. One, because I've worked on advanced propulsion systems, fission rockets, fusion rockets, nuclear power plants for space, I can deal with the silly arguments made by the nasty, noisy negativists that you can't get here from there. Usually these are academics who know nothing at all about what went on in industry. Right. Secondly, I worked under security for 14 years, so I can deal with the silly argument that, oh, you can't cover anything up for 60 years. Baloney. I've been to 20 archives. I've helped cover secrets up. Third, I've had to think about what I call the UFO why questions. There's an article on my website, www.stantonfriedman.com, about the UFO why questions. And the point is that people have no trouble with the 5 large-scale scientific studies that I talk about, because 99% of them haven't read any of them, and I show them the cover and tell them what's in it and all that sort of thing. But what they really want to know is, so why? Why would aliens come here? Why don't they land on the White House lawn? Why doesn't the government tell us what it knows? You know,
all the juicy stuff.
The juicy stuff, yeah.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Because I've had to think about these things, because it's not very good if you're at the end of a lecture and somebody asks you a question for you to say, oh, you know, I'll get back to you tomorrow on that. You have to have something now, you know. And the fourth thing I bring to this is that, at least until I got to be an old man, I found I could depend on my memory and would have the facts at my hand, at hand, to deal with questions. I've known some very bright people who would tell you, I'll get back to you tomorrow on that. You got to be fast on your feet when you're answering questions on, whether it's Larry King or Nightline or any of those things. Partly because the only space you get is what you grab.
Actually, we wanted to ask you about a Larry King show that you were on. And
okay, which one?
There was a gentleman, Bill Nye the Science Guy, and was he a purposely placed plant?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's network policy on CNN's Common Noisy Negativist. No, anyway. They think you have to have two sides to every story, and it doesn't matter if one side has spent years in the trenches doing the hard work and the other guy knows nothing.
Right.
That doesn't matter. And so Bill had been on before. I think they got fed up with James McGaha, the former Air Force pilot, who kept saying that they're not competent observers, they're not professional observers, everybody's mistaken, and so forth. He didn't come across very well. I had some people say, gee, I hope they keep having him on. He does such a rotten job. But now they're saying that about Bill Nye, the Science Guy. His purpose is to deny.
I almost felt sorry for him in a sad way when I saw that.
I hadn't realized how angry I looked during the show until I saw the program. Because when you're on it, you don't see a monitor, and you're trying to pay attention to what people are saying, waiting for more stupid things coming out. He did stick his foot really in his mouth with that silly business of showing a document where one line had been blacked out and saying, all these people are talking about cover-up. Well, all they did was take out the guy's address, which is what you'd expect for privacy. So I could pull out my book, Flying Saucers and Science, and open to the page in which there is a CIA UFO document that's all blacked out except 8 meaningless words. And hopefully that shut him up on that score.
It's like he was going out of his way, That's the thing I really noticed, so I'm wondering if someone put him up to it, you know what I mean?
Well, there are people whose stock and trade is to be a noisy negativist, and they're the experts to be called on because they know the darn networks want to have somebody on from the other side.
Yeah. And didn't do justice that time. I'll tell you that.
Well, look, there are 4 basic rules for debunkers.
Yeah.
Don't bother me with the facts. My mind's made up. What the public doesn't know, I'm not going to tell them. Do your research by proclamation, because investigation is too much trouble. And if you can't attack the data, attack the people. It's easier. Nobody will know the difference.
Yeah.
So that's their approach. And if they come up against somebody like me who has done his homework over the last 50 years, 51, 52, whatever, 51, then they're in trouble. And rarely are they put in that position. But I'll tell you, on an earlier Larry King show, he had about 7 of us on at the same time, including Michael Shermer, who was head of the Skeptics Organization. And he was on the show, and George Noory of Coast to Coast Radio was on the show, and the former governor of Arizona, Fife Symington, was there. Jesse Marcel Jr. was on the show. And the interesting thing was, I had a whole bunch of email after that show saying, I don't understand how you didn't just punch him out, which is style, of course. But what I did do is I approached George Noory within a few days asking, how about a debate between Michael and me on your Coast to Coast? And because he's had Michael on the show, so it's not like this was a setup or anything. Mm-hmm. And so Michael agreed, and we did it about 2 weeks later. And he hadn't done any more homework than he had before he was on the first time. I guess he didn't think he needed to check the facts, the data, whatever. And he started off with a really, well, it was almost as if I had written a script for him. He said, you know, this is kind of silly. There's nothing to this subject. On every thing where you have paranormal, strange stuff, there's always a residue effect. 5% of this stuff can't be explained, not because there's anything crazy going on, but, you know, just not enough data and stuff like that. Boy, did that give me an opening. I blasted him, saying, look, in Project Blue Book, Special Report 14, the largest study ever done for the United States Air Force, 21.5% of the 3,201 sightings that they looked at could not be identified, completely separate from the ones for which there was insufficient information. And the better the quality of the data, the more likely to be unidentifiable. The University of Colorado study, the Condon Report, according to a special UFO subcommittee of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, 30% of the 117 cases studied in detail could not be identified. And it was downhill from there. I mentioned 3 others. I got 80% of the vote. They voted at the end of the 3-hour debate.
What do you think of the new modern sightings and video captures? I know you said before that through Photoshop, there's a high probability that they're not real. But there's been some interesting cases, like there was a landing in Carleton, Ontario. I'm not sure if you've ever seen the footage for that. Do you know if that was real, or was that? I
don't think so. If it's the one I think it was.
It's about 10 years, 15 maybe, even years old in Ottawa there, yeah.
Yeah, I remember
Some
that.
people said it's a helicopter, maybe, a military helicopter or something.
It wasn't a helicopter, but
I know, that's what they say when they closer look at it. Yeah.
Well, the kicker is that there are some good modern sightings, if you will. Still pictures I worry about because of the 14-year-old with Photoshop. But in my lecture, I intentionally used daytime still pictures taken years ago that we know weren't done by Photoshop, and on which there has been a lot of analysis done by people like Dr. Bruce Maccabee, an optical physicist who's looked at hundreds of so-called UFO pictures, and has even published articles in scientific journals about them. And even the University of Colorado found that there were pictures that they couldn't identify. The problem you do get into is that today's cell phone cameras, stuff like that, the digital systems have a lot of problems with them that people don't understand. Especially, I'm wary when people say, well, I didn't see anything, but look what showed up in the film. Well, often that's an optical effect and not a real object out there. But when you look at Stephenville, Texas, for example, there's an awful lot of testimony, and MUFON did a lot of good examination on that one, and particularly impressive, a MUFON consultant looked at the radar data that they managed to get from the FAA. The Air Force wouldn't supply any of theirs, of course. You remember the Air Force, how carefully they did things? We didn't have any F-16s flying. 10 days later, we had 10 flying.
Yeah, that's just
how do you misplace 10 F-16s?
That's right. Well, and then there was also that infamous Russian Roswell incident. It hasn't been proven or disproven that I'm aware of.
Well, yes, it has. Some Russian. I mean, this is where they show this thing stuck in the ground, and the guys with the big coats and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I was in that show with who's the guy who?
Roger Moore, was it?
Yeah, Roger Moore. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not that I met Moore. You know how they do these things.
Yeah,
you get interviewed.
That's right.
With somebody else he talks about, but. There was quite a bit of discussion later about what was wrong with that stuff, and I was very careful in what I said because one thing that really bothered me, there's a picture of a guy showing money passing between a Russian big shot and somebody. I really don't believe it's like expecting you're going to catch a mafia guy giving a bribe to a town councilman or something, or a mayor. You're not going to get away with that, frankly. So, no, that one, the Russians had some really good reasons. Russian investigators, not the Russian government. There are a lot of those. But, look, you don't need to worry. It's kind of like batting averages. A baseball player is a very good hitter if he gets hit a third of the time, right?
Right.
Well, you could say he's lousy 2/3 of the time he doesn't get a hit.
That's true.
And Barry Bonds, a great home run hitter. 1 in 7 or 8 at-bats does he hit a home run. Now, you can say, he just struck out. He's no home run hitter. Well, it's the bigger picture that matters. And so, obviously, we have a different standard for fielding on a baseball team than for hitting. If you only field accurately 1/3 of the time, you're off the team pretty darn quick.
Yeah. So let me ask you, where do you think flying saucers are from? Do you think they're from the future, from outer space, or interdimensions? Like, what's your stance on that?
Well, okay. And I'm glad you used the word flying saucers, because I'm not interested in UFOs. I'm interested in flying saucers. Most UFOs turn out to be IFOs. Let's forget about them. Hey, most isotopes aren't fissionable. I'm a nuclear guy. I want the one that is. What do I care about the fact that 99% aren't? Or the basketball coach says, hey, yeah, I know there are a lot of midgets. Give me one 7-footer. And yes, I know most people aren't 7 feet tall, but so what? Give me the one who is. And amazingly, there are times at NBA games when you'll have 2 guys on the floor that are 7 feet tall, even though it's very rare to have even one 7-footer, So I think I start every lecture with 4 major conclusions. Straightforward. 1, the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. In other words, some UFOs are alien spacecraft. Most are not. I don't care about that. Secondly, the subject of flying saucers represents a kind of cosmic Watergate, meaning that some few people within major governments have known since at least July 1947, when 2 crashed saucers were recovered in New Mexico with bodies, that indeed some UFOs are alien spacecraft. You notice I didn't say everybody in the government knows. That's not how you keep secrets.
Right.
The third conclusion is that there are no good arguments against the first 2, even though people like my University of Chicago classmate, Carl Sagan, spoke eloquently saying there's nothing to this. When you look at their grounds for that conclusion, you find they don't have any. It's a proclamation. It's not the result of an investigation. And finally, 4, because I'm obviously such a shy, retiring kind of guy, we're dealing with the biggest story of the millennium: visits to planet Earth by alien spacecraft, successful cover-up of the best data, body and wreckage for 62 years. Now, if you were to ask me, are some UFOs secret government systems? Sure. Is it possible that they get here by warping space and time? Sure. When I say extraterrestrial, it doesn't have anything to do with how they get here. They're here from some place else, some other time, some other place. So, what's the big deal? It's I just written a column. I write a monthly column for UFO Magazine and for the MUFON Journal. And I've just written a column about the noisy negativists, the debunkers, the current issue of Skeptical Inquirer, which is, it belongs in a delicatessen. It's so full of baloney. The kicker here is that when you're looking at the UFO evidence, it's overwhelming. If you want to look at all the garbage, go ahead, but why waste your time?
Right.
And I don't care how they get here. I mean, sure, I worked on fusion propulsion systems for deep space travel. Now, there's one kind of energy production process that every advanced civilization is going to know about, because that's what powers the stars. Mm-hmm. Our star, the sun, and every other star out there, nuclear fusion. Now, what's the big deal about fusion? Well, you can produce particles that you can eject out the back end of a rocket that only have 10 million times as much energy per particle as they can get in a dumb old chemical rocket. 10 million times. Now, we Earthlings, being the kind of critters we are, we figured out how the sun works in 1938. I guarantee you it was working before that, even though we didn't know how. And the old notions where the sun could only be a few million years old because it's burning gas, and how, it would all burn up because you know how much energy it's producing in a certain period of time. Well, it turns out it's nuclear fusion. We did something about that. We figured it out in 1938. By 1952, we took a typical Earthling approach. We exploded our first hydrogen device, H-bomb, if you will. It was on an island in the Pacific, Eniwetok, in November 1st, 1952. It produced the energy of exploding 10 million tons of TNT. 10 million tons. And the Russians later tested a much bigger one, 50 million tons. And the fireball from that 10 million ton little one was only 3 miles across. Wow. Can you imagine what the aliens thought about that?
Oh, yeah.
What's with these idiots? I mean, gee whiz. So...
That would set off an alarm for sure, eh? If they are more technologically advanced, yeah, they would definitely notice that.
If they were coming here, they're more technologically advanced than we are. That falls out of that because we can't get there yet, but they can come here. Mm-hmm. And the kicker here is we like to think we're at the top of the heap. Yeah. Come on now. Flying saucers finished the job that Copernicus started. You remember old Nick? He had the gall to suggest, it's hard to imagine, but in 1543, he suggested the Earth was not the center of the universe. The sun was, one little step over. The book was banned for 300 years. It took the church a long time to get rid of their condemnation of Galileo for agreeing with Copernicus, But here's the kicker. The universe, our little galaxy, the heck with the universe, we know that the Earth's 4.5 billion years old. The knowable world, and maybe there are 10 universes, I don't know, and it doesn't matter, is at least 13 billion years old. And just down the street from us are two stars, Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli. That's the constellation of Reticulum, southern sky, can't see it from here, that are not only 39 light years from us, and not only an eighth of a light year apart, which means they're 35 times closer to each other than the sun is to the next star over, but they're a cool billion years older than the sun. Now, think about it for a minute. Look how our technology has changed in the last 100 years. Make it 110, and there was no flight, no DNA, no nuclear, no space, no, all kinds of things. No internet, all that sort of stuff. Now, what if somebody out there, like somebody on a planet around either one of these two sun-like stars, and only 5% of the stars in the neighborhood are sun-like, what if one of them got started a little bit before we did? They'd certainly have more incentive for interstellar travel because they got a next-door neighbor.
That's right. Yeah.
And they've had a cool billion years to develop a little better technology. Give them 1,000. Look ahead 100. Look back 100. I'm old enough. I'm not 100, but I mean, I know what things were like. Well, what I'm trying to say is, one of the reasons, and I've just written a column about this, that the nasty, noisy negativists seem so resistant to the idea of alien visitors is they have no concept of all the development that's taken place, and that could have started somewhere else a long time ago, and we haven't stopped in our development. Moore's Law, I guess, for computers, a factor of 2 every 18 months, I don't know, something like that, probably faster than that now. But there are all kinds of new things being discovered. And anybody...
Is that what you think Roswell purposely was an event that was meant to happen?
No. I think accidents happen. I mean, did we blow up a shuttle? It was $1 billion vehicle. We had 2 of them. Accidents happen. For stupid reasons, too. What was it, a little piece of insulation in one?
Yeah, the foam, that's right.
There were some conspiracy theory people saying it could have even been a laser shooting it down, but who knows?
We didn't... Well, ours or...
Well, you never know from who, but...
not in Roswell.
No,
for the actual shuttle that
okay.
exploded in the midair there with that little piece of insulation. I don't know. There's just a few conspiracy theories kicking around. Maybe it was.
Oh, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure you probably heard of them.
I think Roswell happened. It's unfortunate. They could have run into. We know, as a matter of fact, when you do your homework, as I like to do, because I don't want anybody to catch me not saying something that isn't, or saying something that isn't true. But it turns out that there was a radar system on over at White Sands that was, back then it was only vacuum tube radars. It was a tracking radar. It wasn't moving around in a circle the way search radars do, you know. And we know it was on because they don't like to warm those things up. And the beam was focused north. So if two saucers came flying around, I mean, that's an interesting area. We were testing rockets. That's where the first atom bomb was tested, etc. And they ran into a radar beam, and it discombobulated their guidance system, their propulsion system. You know, hey, we got to put lightning rods on these things, you know, that kind of thing. There could have been a mid-air collision briefly, and one of them makes it down in the plains of San Augustine, and the other one limps over above the Foster Ranch and explodes in mid-air. And I say that because I was the first to talk to Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer for the only atomic bombing group in the entire world, which was the group based in Roswell. And the thing that he told me in our first conversation, 1978, was that he figured it had to explode in midair because A, there was no crater, and B, the wreckage was in small pieces spread over a large area, half to two-thirds of a mile long, a few hundred yards wide. How do you do that without a crater? When airplanes hit, boy, they make a crater.
That's right. And what really happened to the bodies? Have you heard any true stories or anything that can confirm? Because
you had to throw in that word "true," huh?
Yeah.
Well, the first story I heard of the plains of San Augustine crash included bodies. The Roswell story, Jesse didn't see bodies for his trip out there. But the way later things evolved, it appears that there was I'll call it a crew compartment, a rescue pod, I don't know what else to call it. Right. It was found 2.5 miles away. And it's gently rolling hills out there, no trees, it's desert. So they wouldn't have seen it from the crash site where the debris field was. And that there were bodies in a crew compartment out there, and they got brought back into the base. 3 there, 3 at the other place. There are stories about how long one of them might have lived. Who knows? I'm not on the distribution list for classified government documents about UFOs. Right, yeah. And never was. I had a security clearance. I handled and wrote classified documents, but not about flying saucers, folks.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to ask you, have you ever followed anything about Dr. Roger Lear's work with the alien implant issue?
I saw him last week at the International UFO Congress. I've known Roger for a lot of years. It was very exciting. His latest analysis, the isotope ratios, on this little bit of tiny stuff that was taken out of a guy's toe, really were shocking to me as a nuclear guy. Because, yes, you can buy separated isotopes for certain elements, but all the isotope ratios were crazy. And they're going to have another set of measurements made, but very exciting. And certainly some of the things he's taken out of people's hands and feet are normal. I mean, podiatrists are removing stuff all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
But this stuff is quite exciting. So I'm looking forward to the next go-around on the measurements, and that's exciting. That's real evidence. And
real research. I love that stuff.
Well, let me ask you about a case that you also touched with Betty and Barney Hill. They're probably the most known for being
abductions.
Yeah. Yes. Would you say that since their story came out, though, that it caused a lot of copycat syndrome?
Well, I wouldn't put it quite that way. I would say that it resulted in many more people who'd been abducted coming forth, Remember, they had nobody to copycat because there hadn't been any public stories. It wasn't the first abduction, remember. Bud Hopkins, outstanding abduction researcher, has cases back in the 30s,
Right.
and theirs happened in 1961. Have there been people since who copycatted? Probably, although, look, I've found, when I ask after my lecture, I ask how many people have seen a flying saucer, and I've defined my terms earlier, and tell people, it's okay, just raise your hand, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, it turns out about 10% of the audience believe they've seen one. And then I ask, how many of you reported what you saw? 90% of the hands go down. Now, my kicker is this. If people are reluctant to report just a darn old UFO sighting, saucer flying by, big deal, how much less likely they are to report an abduction case. On the other hand, I must say, people who've had a sighting want to tell somebody they can trust about it. Dr. J. Allen Hynek wrote a book, The UFO Appeareance, and by that he was talking about the fact you talk to somebody 20 years later who's had a good case, a good sighting.
I have that book. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's a good book. It's one of the 5 I recommend.
Yeah.
And the experience is still real to them 20 years later. So the danger of copycats is always there, but I think the Hill case is very special. I refer people to the book Captured by myself and Kathleen Martin, who's Betty's niece, who is executor of her estate, has all the tapes, transcribed them all, spent a lot of time with Betty trying to sort out, did this happen or didn't it? And I've met Betty and Barney both, so, Barney died in 1969, shows you how old I am.
Whoa.
It's a very good case, and Kathleen did most of the research that's in the book, and of particular importance is the fact that the noisy negativists have tried to claim that, look, Betty had dreams about being abducted. She was always talking about them to Barney. He picked up on them. And when they were under hypnosis, of course, he just echoed back the dreams. Well, that's baloney. What Kathleen did was look at several different situations. What did Betty say in her dreams? She had notes. And she did not recite them to Barney. He read them once. They went in the drawer, and that was the end of that. But more importantly, we have his testimony under hypnosis and her testimony under hypnosis, Betty's and Barney's. And this was done in soundproof room with amnesia induced after each session, so they weren't able to talk to each other about what the other one was saying or what they were saying. When you do it this way, if you look at the situation where they were both together, their accounts match. Like when they were in the car before they were taken out of the car and on board the craft. Yeah. If you look at the situations where they were not together, then you get each one's testimony, and they're different. And so a comparative analysis shows that the situations don't match the dreams that Betty had. In large they do, but not in the small, in the details. And Kathy transcribed all the sessions. Now, the important point here, incidentally, not enough people appreciate the fact that Dr. Benjamin Simon, the guy who did the hypnosis, there were a total of 10 hours of hypnosis tapes, didn't know anything about flying saucers, really. But he was a very world-class expert on helping shell-shock war veterans and then later others who had had traumatic experiences, had missing time. A guy whose buddy's head is blown off next to him on a battlefield.
Right.
It's a little hard to integrate, He ran a hospital that had 3,000 beds for people with what we would today call post-traumatic stress disorder. Back then it was shell shock, So he had great experience with that. I've even seen the Army movie, Let There Be Light, starring Dr. Simon, in which he showed how he used his very special hypnosis techniques to have people relive the experience, work through it, in other words, and come out the other side ready to get back to living again. And so remember, too, which the noisy negativists don't say very often, Betty was a social worker, a supervisor in the welfare department, state of New Hampshire. Barney worked for the post office, was on the governor's Civil Rights Commission. Very respectable people, well known in the community. these people had everything to lose and nothing to gain. They didn't want the story to go public, but a writer had gotten a tape from somebody who'd heard a little private talk that they gave. They tried to stop the newspaper from carrying the article. They didn't. They thought they'd lose their jobs. So this was not people seeking attention, far from it. Yeah. But it turned out the response was great, partly because John Fuller had done a good job in that first book, The Interrupted Journey. Incidentally, Dr. Simon's comments on the manuscript are in Fuller's papers, which are at Boston University archives, which, of course, I've looked at, and boy, did he give Fuller a hard time. It was part of the agreement that he would have final say because it was his professional reputation that was on the line. And boy, he made no bones about, you can't say this, you can't say this, that's not true, I'll be laughed at if you say this, blah, blah, blah. So The Interrupted Journey was a good book, but it wasn't the whole story. And incidentally, I should add that we have it in writing that Dr. Simon said that the emotional intensity, as they were reliving the experience separately now, was greater than that of any of the war veterans that he had dealt with. He had to stop one session each because he didn't think they could handle the terror that they were clearly reliving. That's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, that makes it more than real.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the notion, some people say, oh, all those hypnotists just put the notion in the person's head. Well, in this case, it was just the opposite. He was doing his darnedest to steer them away from aliens. He believed they saw something in the sky. Yeah. But aliens? Crazy. Well, he didn't succeed.
Do you think, what's the chance that there could actually be living, disguised aliens living amongst us? Is that something that's way out there? Or?
Well, I don't think so. If you can control reproduction, and remember, if we had talked about, like this octuplets case recently,
yes.
If we had talked about implanting an embryo, say, 60 years ago, artificial insemination and stuff like that, you'd have been laughed out of town, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. Well, what if these guys now had to breed hybrids?
Right.
And look, you can't send a tall, blonde Norwegian to spy in China, can you?
No.
So I can't say that there aren't aliens walking around amongst us, or hybrid aliens, or whatever. I don't know. I'd say there's a chance of that.
Yeah. And what's your opinion on the reptilian theory that's running out there? Is that something that holds proof to it, or is it just...
Well, it fits with a lot of stories. The problem is, Dave Jacobs has discussed this in detail, Dr. David Jacobs, in his books about abductions. The problem is these guys seem to be able to control their minds. And, they don't put a gun in a person's back or a knife at their throat. And when I was at the exact location where Betty and Barney Hill were abducted, you look there and you realize that there was no way in the world that Barney on his own would have gone off the main highway onto a secondary road and then onto a tertiary dirt road. Yeah. Somebody had to guide him because he winds up at the only place in the nearby area where you could land say a 60-foot diameter saucer. It's heavily treed up there. And you just stand there and you realize that somebody up there was directing him. Also, one reason that governments might be concerned, wouldn't it be nice if you could control the actions of people at a distance? I mean, drop all your guns now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
I believe walk into a nation and take it over with nothing. No resistance whatsoever.
It's clear there's a mind control part of this. And I try to tell people, I say, look, yeah, I worked on far-out technology, but I think aliens are into other things as well. I would expect they know about biology and aging and learn to control it. I think they would know about the world of the mind and the spirit and reincarnation and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. It would amaze me if they didn't.
And so, are they responsible for the cattle and the human mutilation cases, or is that something?
I don't know. There aren't enough cases where people see the saucer and the mutilated cow.
Right.
It's kind of like the crop circles.
Yes.
We have Ted Phillips has collected 5,000 physical trace cases, And even if you get rid of the ones where they didn't see the saucer, you still have 4,000 from like 90 countries, where people see a saucer on or near the ground, and after it leaves, one finds physical changes. They're not pretty like the crop circles, but you can associate them.
Helicopters, too, have been sighted, they say.
Well, sure.
Or Linda Moulton Howe was suggesting,
Well, yeah, there are black helicopters, and there are people doing classified things. And in a chapter in Flying Saucers in Science, I point out about the cosmic Watergate that anybody who thinks we can't keep secrets better be aware of the fact that, for example, the Corona spy satellite, the first one that worked in 1960, got more data on Soviet military installations than all the U-2 flights that had preceded it. It was the first of a number of successful satellites. The first public discussion about the Corona spy satellite was in 1995. Believe me, there were billions of dollars spent on those things. The NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, admitted in 2005 that they had launched 7 Poppy satellites. I don't name them, I just report them. These spied on Russian ships between 62 and 71. First public discussion, 2005. And the NRO has been known to spend $500 million on a single spy satellite.
Yeah.
And that involves lots of people, thousands of people. So, there's plenty going on that we don't know much about.
Oh, that was going to lead into a question I wanted to ask you, actually. Do you think they already have an active Star Wars project? I mean, how do you keep track of all these, sending satellites up? Developing countries are starting to send satellites up.
Well, I think we've certainly worried about that for a long time. And I can remember in the 60s, we were talking about one company I worked at about putting satellites up that had the nuclear weapons on board that could be deorbited to attack somebody else. You hide it up there just like you hide Polaris submarines. So nobody can find you, but you can retaliate. Mutual assured destruction, MAD. That was the attitude back then. I think we've thought a lot about spy killer satellites and knocking. Look, if you talk about knocking an attacking missile, a ballistic missile, out of the sky, you could certainly talk about knocking a satellite out of the sky. And as a matter of fact, the Chinese did that successfully, not this recent thing, but a while back.
I remember hearing
that. With all that secrecy, is that why full disclosure is nowhere near in the horizon?
Well, that's certainly one of the reasons. And people keep asking me at the Congress last week, which had a greater enrollment, if you will, a greater attendance than last year's. Over 600 people there, so the people are interested. People kept asking me, well, do you think Obama, with his new transparency, is going to immediately release UFO data?
Exactly.
I say I hope not, because the whole world right now is on his shoulders in terms of, we need the economic situation improved. This would be a destabilizing thing.
Oh, for sure.
And I don't think it makes good sense for him to do that now. And I've always said that I don't think technical data ought to be put out on the table. Why not? Because there are Osamas and other bad guys out there. You cannot tell your friends without telling your enemies. They listen to the radio too, and then read the newspapers and so forth.
That's true.
And, it's a real problem. And also, I think if you're going to release the truth, it should be done on an international basis. UFOs are seen over all countries, not just the U.S. And it should be done in conjunction with an announcement that soon there will be international conferences looking at the political, the religious, the economic implications of alien visitations.
Some countries already took steps, though. I don't know if there's disagreement within governments. France has released a lot of files. England's trying to.
It's all
be careful. Be careful.
Yeah, I know a lot of it. Yeah, some of it's not the best stuff, you know. I read some of the files. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I kind of know this. I don't know.
The French and the English got a lot of publicity for putting their files on the internet, but what wasn't told was there was no highly classified stuff there.
Yeah, exactly. It was just average or whatever.
Well, remember that the United States has had 12,000 sightings available for you to look at in microfilm since the late 1970s. Blue Book stuff. And also remember, and this is the kicker, General Carol Bolander was asked to decide what we should do about Project Blue Book in 1969 after the Condon report had recommended we close it. He had no previous connection with it. He'd worked on the Lunar Excursion Module, good engineer. He put out a memo in October of 1969 in which he stated that he recommended that we do close Project Blue Book. He said, moreover, reports of UFOs which could affect national security are made in accordance with Joint Army-Navy Air Force Publication 146 or Air Force Manual 55-11 and are not part of the Blue Book system. If that wasn't enough, 2 paragraphs later he says, if Project Blue Book is closed, the public won't have a place to report UFO sightings. However, as previously noted, reports which could affect national security will continue to be investigated using the regulations established for that purpose. Think about that for a minute. I located him and talked to him, and he knew exactly what he was saying.
So they never closed the door totally, basically.
Well, what he said was, you know, why would the government care about what you and I see standing out on a street corner? However, if a saucer goes down the runway at a Strategic Air Command base where nuclear weapons are stored, that's a national security problem.
Exactly. That makes sense. Yeah.
And so for all governments, the hot stuff hasn't been released. And without the hot stuff, what do you got? I mean, you know, not much by comparison.
Well, let me ask you, there's also a conspiracy theory amongst some UFO believers about Project Blue Beam. Have you heard about that?
No, not offhand. Blue
what
Beam.
It is, it's a supposed holographic system that they're using chemtrails to broadcast a UFO invasion. And it's supposedly funded by NASA, and I don't know more than that because it's very little information-wise. But
well, that's provocative. I don't know anything about it. I should correct one miscomprehension by many people. NASA, they say, oh, that's a civilian body. They sponsor all kinds of classified work. Yeah. I worked on programs supported by NASA.
Yeah.
You know, so let's get rid of that nonsense.
Right.
And NASA has not been forthcoming about
No, I've heard about there could even be moon bases. And they've doctored the films and stuff or airbrushed them somehow.
Yep.
I really do.
And I've heard that, and it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Jeez.
Well, let me also ask you, what's your take on the chemtrail happening? Why do you think that these chemicals are being sprayed into our environment? Is it to change our environment more suitable for extraterrestrials, or is there something not so far
I don't know. They might be there to change our climate, for that matter, to reflect light as a big experiment. You know, climate change, maybe we can do something about it, but you need a large-scale experiment, I guess.
Right.
And there have been past experiments where the government has done some, how shall I put this, less than honest, less than totally safe things like spread radioactivity around and big cold germs
orange.
Places, you know.
Yeah, my mom told me a story in Vancouver when she was a child that they used to spray DDT from water trucks into the streets, and the kids would run behind it and get soaked by DDT. So, yeah, you're right. There's quite a lot of stuff going on.
Well, there are experiments done on syphilis drugs by the government, U.S. government, black people. There's a long history of misrepresentation. I use the word cosmic Watergate because that has an almost peaceful sound about it, but sometimes it's been a lot of nastiness on the cover-ups of various things.
Let me also ask you, what's your hope in the next 10 years for ufology? more honesty, more cooperation from higher sources? Do you have any major allies that are helping you, and do you have any major adversaries?
Or will they expose themselves as well to us in the next 10 years or so?
I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. My hope is that some reporters will become the Woodward and Bernstein of the cosmic Watergate instead of the political Watergate. I think in 6 months the lid could be blown off if somebody started with General Bolinder's memo, for example, and 160 pages of whited out NSA documents where you can read UFO documents where you can read one line per page. There's ample data there. And if you went after reports from former military people and stuff like that, and got the government to offer amnesty or whatever fancy word you want to use, right. I mean, after all, they're not a threat to the security of the United States. Why can't people talk about them then, former military guys? I think it could be done in 6 months. My hope, I guess, is that it'll be, sooner than 10 years, partly because the Pope has actually spoken up to say, hey, God made us, he made them, our brothers in space, no big deal. He said that this past year.
Yeah, I recall that. But I still don't think that the true religion and religious peoples out there are not ready for it. Mentally, physically, spiritually, I still think it would destroy
Hey,
it.
The Hindus, the Muslims, the Mormons, they're all willing to say there's life out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Pat Robertsons of the world who
That's
say
right.
we are the only intelligent life in the universe. What a sad commentary that is.
Yeah.
If this is the best that God can do, she's being vastly...
That's so Cro-Magnon.
Yeah, a lot of room for improvement, that's for sure.
Yeah. So I'm still an optimist, and I've been around this place a long time. And what I should get rid of another notion. There's a chapter in the book Flying Saucers and Science about opinion polls. And it will shock a lot of people to realize that there are more believers than non-believers. The problem is most people think other people don't believe, so they act accordingly.
Right.
They won't report their sighting, etc.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So there's time, there's plenty of room. It's okay, folks. You're not alone. I've only had 11 hecklers in over 700 lectures. That says a great deal because I come on very, very strong.
And that was the number one question on Canadians' wish list to Obama, eh? Releasing the, UFO files and letting us know if they really exist.
Well,
I don't know if
I don't
heard about
expect him.
them.
Yeah, I don't expect him to do that. As I said before, I don't think...
It just shows the interest, though. Like, that was the actual number one question posted to, towards Obama and his administration. So, everybody has, they have high hopes and,
Actually, I wanted to ask you that. Who's more forthcoming with information, Canadian officials or American in
That's
regard
not
to
as
UFO?
simple. It's not
or
as
European or, all around the world, basically.
There's much more data out there than most people realize, and Canada has carefully and silently posted a great deal of stuff that they had at the RCMP, that the big research and development offices in Ottawa. They finally put that. It was all available before, but you had to go there. You had to file a freedom and access to information request and all that. Now it's available, but they didn't make a noise about it the way the French and the Danish and the English have made it. So Canada's one good thing. I've been to the Canadian archives, and what you didn't see was nastiness toward the police and stuff, or toward the government. They don't call RCMP pigs in most parts of Canada anyway.
Yeah,
and they did in the United States for a long time. There's a lot of good cases there, but we remember now, Canada and the United States are tied together on the Aerospace Defense Command. Mm-hmm. It's a joint effort, and pilots are instructed to file service reports, communication instructions for reporting vital intelligence sightings. What a mouthful. And those are classified by definition to begin with, and Canada's mixed up in that with the United States. So Canada hasn't had the nastiness of, say, the 2 government reports on Roswell, which were truly full of baloney again, and I talk about them in some of the papers I've read. Canada hasn't taken that sort of nasty attitude. They have lied. It's just like J. Edgar Hoover. Got asked a lot of questions about the FBI and UFOs. And he said it is not now, nor has it ever been the role of the FBI to investigate UFO sightings. Bruce Maccabee filed a Freedom of Information Act request back in the 70s. Got over 1,500 pages of FBI UFO stuff. I mean, that's why I have the article, the Government UFO Lies. Everybody was lying.
Yeah.
So, it seems to be, as long as they can get away with it, it works. Why shouldn't they? That's their attitude.
Exactly. Well, let me ask you, too, are you aware of any prepared UFO landing bases that they can quickly, scoop it up and get it out of the attention as fast as possible, even more top secret than Area 51?
Well, the government owns an awful lot of land in an awful lot of places and has a lot of classified bases, and there are underground bases in a number of places. You want to stay away from the spy satellites, and you want to stay away from nuclear weapons should they be dropped in your direction.
Right.
So I'm sure there are places that we're ready to have aliens land if they choose to do so, and without necessarily bringing in the TV cameras.
Could that might have what had occurred in Shag Harbor, an underground, underwater?
I don't think so. I think somebody goofed. There was an accident, and there is another conference this year, incidentally.
Right.
A week after the MUFON conference in Denver, and I'll be at both. My website has a whole list of the places I'm going to be, and
yes, I listed it on the chat room. If anybody wants to take a look at that, go ahead.
It's no, I don't think that's what happened at Shag Harbor.
No.
I talked to one of the witnesses. Somebody had a problem. Hey, accidents happen, folks. Ain't nobody perfect.
Yeah, tensions were high back then. The war going on and stuff.
67? Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And let me ask you also: has there been any updates, new information in regards to the Flatwoods case?
Frank Ficino Jr., who spent more than 15 years in that case, and I do have some copies of his book, Shoot Them Down, which covers Flatwoods, the events of 1952. He's dug out quite a lot of information, including the Blue Book files, finally, and his interviews with a couple of the key people have never been done by anybody else. Colonel Levitt, who was ordered to take a National Guard unit in and has never talked outside. Frank's the only one who's been able to interview him. He's dead now, so nobody else is going to do it. What's the guy's name? It was a reporter from the local newspaper who was there the day after Frank managed to talk to him before he died. So it's a very good case, and there will be a new book out within the next, I won't predict, but say within the next 6 months, focused on just the Flatwoods aspects as opposed to all the crazy events of 1952.
Right. And do you have any motion pictures in the horizon? Would you ever be a part of that, like if somebody asked to do a recreation?
Well, I have been. There's the movie UFOs Are Real, which came out in ~79. These are listed on my website. There's a bunch of DVDs.
No, I mean not an official movie. I mean something like a Hollywood version.
UFOs Are Real has been on television, and Flying Saucers Are Real is available. And also, on October April sometime around April 7th, Vision TV in Canada will have a movie done by the Gray brothers about the Betty and Barney Hill case that Kathleen Martin and I are in, that was shot in New Hampshire. Okay. So I'm looking forward to that, although you never know what movie types are going to do. I mean, they're not. There's a difference between the artists and the scientists.
That's right. And let me ask you, too, are you going to be appearing in Toronto anytime soon, or any Canadian dates for speaking lectures?
I don't have any Canadian dates right now. I've been so busy with the last 2 books, and I'm working on a third if I can get the publisher to finally commit himself. It's impossible, isn't it?
Yeah.
All the stupid things that smart people have said that have stood in the way of progress in medicine, flight, space, all kinds of other areas. And when you start working on books, you don't have as much time to do mailings to colleges. If there's anybody out there who needs a speaker, look at my website. It tells you how to reach me.
That's true. Well, we have definitely covered the hour plus, and
yes,
it's been such a joy to talk to you.
My pleasure.
I'm completely honored, and hopefully someday we can actually do an on-camera interview as well, because that'll be the next project for Paranormal Guys Inc.
Oh, I do lots of them.
Anytime you're available, let us know, and we will definitely set that up, sir. I want to thank you very much again for joining us, and you have a great day.
Yep. Thanks talking to you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I want to say thanks to everyone else that joined Paranormal Guys Inc. Episode number 7, Reloaded, with Stanton Friedman. He is an absolutely amazing person.
That was a great show.
Forthcoming, and it was a joy, a pleasure, and an honor to speak with him. I hope everyone has a great day. From your host, Jason Pepper, and co-host, Derek Frankham, thanks for joining Paranormal Guys Inc. Radio. Join us soon for our next episode. Have a great day.
All the best, guys.